Today, I'm going to share with you something that I have been learning about recently, which I think is going to help you tremendously if you're anything like me and you are experiencing life on planet Earth right now, which is very interesting. And that is a topic of how to talk to people who are still in the matrix, how to talk to people who are quote unquote asleep, who are still programmed and believing the mainstream narrative, how to actually talk to people effectively in a way to wake them up. And if you're anything like me, then probably over the past year and a half, or maybe even before that, you've been having many of these like facepalm moments where you're just like, how is this possible that almost 8 billion people are believing what the narrative is? And like, how do you actually get through to people? Because you may have noticed when you try to present information or talk to people, you get the opposite of what you would think would happen. And so that has been a big puzzle for me my whole life, and actually more so over the past year and a half. And I've recently found a way, which is very exciting to me because I feel there's hope, and it's given me a lot of hope. And what this is it's called Candles in the Dark. It's a course created by Larkin and Amanda Rose. I'm putting a link down below. It's called Candles in the Dark, aptly, suitably named. And check it out. It's a 6-part course. I think it's only about $75. I'm not affiliated with it in any way. But what this is Larkin and Amanda Rose, they are experts at talking to people who are brainwashed and in a cult, what they call statists, or people who believe in authority outside of themselves, and how to actually deprogram people who are brainwashed in the matrix, in a cult, and in that belief system. They typically speak once a year in the Anarchapulco Anarchist Conference. They're really good at what they do, and the course is phenomenal. So I got this about 6 months ago because I wanted to check it out, and I've been going at it and finally just went through the whole thing, and it's really opened up my mind, and I wanted to share with you what I've learned because it's changing my perspective on things, and it's really making me think, and I think you really enjoy it. So my goal in this video is not to share with you everything I've learned, because I couldn't possibly do that. I'm not an expert in this, but I want to share with you the golden nuggets which I've taken away from this and the excitement that I've picked up from it. Hopefully that you check it out, or if you don't, that even just what I share with you will help you communicate better and give you a different perspective, so you can be way more effective out there in the world if you want to make a difference right now, so that you can actually make a difference, and most importantly, stop wasting your energy, and to realize when you're wasting your energy and why that's actually happening. So yeah, this is quite exciting. So the first thing, and you may have realized this, and this is what Larkin and Amanda just open up the whole course with, if you get it, is realizing that there is a right way to talk to people, and then there's a wrong way to talk to people. And most people are doing the wrong way. 99.9% of people who are in the community of researchers or conspiracy theorists, if you might want to call them, they use their completely wrong way of communication when trying to share truth with people. And the good news is there's actually a right way of doing it. And it's very effective. It's very quick, but it's completely counterintuitive to the way most of us have been conditioned to think. This is where it gets exciting. So most of the time, and you've maybe found yourself doing this, I know I have throughout my life, when you research some information, when you go down the rabbit hole, all of a sudden what happens? You have this urge to want to share it with people, right? And what do? You go out, as soon as something triggers you, someone's talking about this thing, and you're like, well, have you heard about this? And you're like, no. Oh yeah, let me tell you all about it. There's this YouTube video, that video, this book. Have you heard about David Icke and this, and reptilians, and the Nazis in the backside of the moon, and the secret space program? The whole thing, just, depending on how deep down the rabbit hole you are, you can go very deep. And what typically happens with that? Do people go like, wow, you blow my mind, I'm going to check all this out? No, typically people usually take a step back, and you find you have a lot less friends, and you maybe don't hear from them again. Or if you're like me, you just move into a town in South America full of conspiracy theorists living in their own bubble, and we just bounce off each other for the rest of our lives. That's also a possibility. So that's typically what happens, right? you don't get across, or people just disconnect. They look at you like you're crazy, right? How many of your family members, friends look at you crazy, or you get just that moment of apathy of like, nah, I don't know about that. You hear something like that. Are you sure? Well, I'll take, yeah, okay. Well, and they just go off on their lives. And you're thinking like, why isn't everybody getting this? I mean, with everything, like, this is important. This is so important. Why is people not getting it? And I'll tell you why. And this is what I've discovered from the course. It's because you are the problem. Your psychology and how you're approaching it is actually the problem. And actually, because it's so important, because the information is so jarring, and because it's so world changing with potentially very, very bad effects out in the world, well, not potentially, factually, if you're watching this, we can probably agree on that. Because it's so important, your own psychology gets in the way of actually talking to people. And there's a right way and a wrong way of talking to people. And to really understand the foundation of what Larkin talks about in this course, he gives the metaphor or the example of, like, if you go out skateboarding and you break your leg and you go to the doctor, can the doctor heal your leg? No, actually. You might think that, but all he can do is take an x-ray and go, yep, it's broken. Do you want me to adjust it for you? All right. Adjustment done. Put it in a cast. All right, go home now and rest, and the bone will heal itself. You cannot do anything to, like, make the bone heal, aside from taking some different supplements and maybe some healing modalities or something I'm not aware of. But you could be like, I want to let it heal. It's not good. It's probably going to get in the way. The more you try, the best way is just to relax. And communicating with people who are brainwashed is exactly the same way. You are not there to wake them up. As much as you want to just shake people up and just force things upon them and get them to buy into the new narrative, you can't. The only thing you can do is be like that doctor, take an x-ray and make them realize that the bone of their mind is broken and adjust it. And then they go out and they find the information themselves. And they, over a period of time, actually come to the same conclusions. And if you think about it, if you think about the way in which you came to the point where you are right now, depending on what you believe about what's going on and the information that you have access to, how did your awakening unfold? Were you just totally in the matrix and believing in the government and authority and the news and, things are the way they are and taxes go to roads and schools and everything is awesome, like in the Lego movie. And then all of a sudden somebody came up to you and said, hey, you know what? It's actually this way. And you're like, whoa, thank you. My whole world has been blown. I totally have a new belief system, a new paradigm. No, it probably didn't happen that way, right? You were probably like me, going along your way, totally kind of in your own mentality, and all of a sudden something just was like off in the matrix. It's kind of like that moment in the Matrix where he's like, oh, I just saw a black cat, and Trinity looks at him and was like, was it a black cat? Was it the same cat? Well, yeah. He's like, oh damn, it's a glitch. There's like a glitch that happens and you're like, huh? Maybe there's something else, something going on here that I'm not fully aware of, and I want to investigate. I don't know what's pulling me into that investigation, but it seems to be deeper than this voice in my head. It seems to be coming from my gut and from my heart. And that pulled you into investigation, and one thing led to another over months and years, and all of a sudden you were where you are. And it actually didn't take that long for you to come to the point where you realized that the entire narrative that was being given to you was wrong. And now you were on the course of trying to figure out your own narrative. And there was emotional hurdles along that because there's probably parts of you that needed to die. For some people, it's a very perilous journey. Waking up and realizing that the world they've been sold is actually a big lie. And that's actually one of the reasons why it's so hard for people to look at it, because it's so darn uncomfortable. So that's the way it happens. And that's the only way it can happen. And that's the only way that it must happen if we are to wake up planet Earth, is to propagate that process. No other way. And if you look at what most people expect to happen when they communicate the wrong way, it's totally that first example. We expect that we're just going to come at people whether it's on Facebook or in real life, like, no, let me tell you the truth and you don't know anything and show me these facts and here are these facts. And even if you approach it from a sane, rational point of view, what do we expect to happen? This is the other real golden nugget, which leads to the whole core of what he teaches, is we expect people to just kind of like go like, wow, bing, awakening moment. And that, oh, we've done our job. Thank you. I've woken this person up. Like that never happens. That never happens, right? Because of what I just explained, because it's not the pattern. And you have to realize if you've already gone down this path of realizing your own sovereignty, your own connection to authority, realizing, the world isn't the way it's being presented to you, understanding what the corporate media is all about, the whole prerogative, it's been a journey and a process for you, right? If somebody has gone the other way for years or decades or their whole life, that is quite a course correction to come to that same place. It doesn't have to take a long time, but the degree in shiftage is substantial, right? And so that's not going to happen in one moment. All you can do is make them realize that this is actually happening and that it is the case, or plant the seed of that and then walk away. And this is where it gets really, really interesting with Candles in the Dark. It's a system of first navigating your own psychology and then asking people the right questions, provided that you are in the right psychology, which is super important. Asking the right questions to get people to realize their own cognitive dissonance. See, inside of everybody, what I've learned from this is, like, first of all, to back up a little bit, when we talk to people, we tend to be very evangelical about these topics, because it is so important and we're so passionate about it, because we want a different planet and we feel like the effects of what's happening encroaching on our own freedoms and our own experience of planet Earth, right? So we get very emotional, very passionate. And we're in that place, we can very typically project on people what is completely should not be projected, like, the sheep. We start to see people as the enemy of our own truth. And what Larkin talks about is you can't do that. You have to come to a place where you really see what's going on, and you're coming and you're speaking with people from a place of actually wanting to help them. Because inside of everybody, and I'm just grabbing this snapshot from the course, I hope it's okay with Larkin and Amanda, and what they show here is there's this wedge. Inside of everybody, in their own mind, there's the real them, which has that connection to their own gut, their own intuition, their own conscience. And it's there. It's inside of everybody. Every human being has this. Their sense of right and wrong, right? But to some people, it's just not developed well. Like for me, and I'm sure for you, when you just see something out there in a narrative, you just know it's bullshit because your body just tells you, right? And it's just like, duh, obvious, right? But why do other people not have it developed? Well, because it's been suppressed and socially engineered out of people, right? So that's there in every single person. But there's also the other part, which is the other part of the wedge, and that is the bullshit and the programs and all the misinformation and the whole narrative, which is actually just a sandcastle built on absolutely nothing, which is just the assumption that there is an authority outside of you. And that's really the core of the problem. People's belief that they don't have authority, they can't find answers for themselves, and that the authority is outside, that it's in government, that it's in the media, that it's in the medical establishment, and blah, blah, blah. And when you really start to talk to people and get down to the root of what they believe about that, that's when people just start to have no answer. Like, I don't know, well, the media, authority, and the doctors, and the tests, and the COVID, I don't know, it's all just nonsense. It's just like gobbledygook, right? And to you, it feels like gobbledygook, but for them, it's the only world that they know, right? And so understanding that you're coming to people and talking to them, you have to, you have to come with the right goal in mind. You have to come with the right psychology in yourself, understanding that you're trying to help them out of a lie. And the only way to do that, first and foremost, is to be centered in yourself, peaceful, calm, and completely unattached to the outcome of how things are going to go. And this is very counterintuitive because most of us are very attached when we talk to people. And I'll talk about that in a second. But to wrap up or something I want to bring home here, another thing that really hit me from the course is that the real goal in any communication is not to wake people up. It's not to give facts. You actually want to stay away as far from facts as possible, which is completely opposite of what most people do. Here, read this, watch this. It's like, no, you want to get people to the cognitive dissonance. Because if you go into facts, if you go into debating, into bringing your own belief system into the conversation, you're actually not doing the job of that doctor. Like, the doctor isn't there to like why did you fall off a skateboard? I don't skateboard. You should rollerblade instead. Like, here's all these facts about why rollerblading is better. That's why your leg is broken. It's like, no, he's just there to fix your leg, right? So as a communicator, as a real mission-driven person to help the world wake up, you just have to play the role of being the space that helps people come to their own cognitive dissonance about things. That is your only goal in communicating, and it's much easier said than done because there's so many of your own programs getting in the way. And that's what this whole course is about, actually dropping those programs so you can just have a 5-minute conversation and ask people the most basic rudimentary questions that actually makes people totally freak out and like, what? And then you've planted the seed and then you walk away. And this really startled me, or not startled, but it and really opened up my mind. When you've done your job right with somebody is usually you have 2 signs. They'll either get really angry and run away, and then you just walk away and you don't talk to them. And they'll usually come back to you later, be like, I thought about what you said, and do you know about this? And then you can actually start giving them people information because they're already open to the whole conversation. And the other reason when you've come to that cognitive dissonance and you've done your job right is when people just respond in that way that I just showed of like, actually, I don't know what to think about this, and this is really confusing, and let me get back to you on this. And that's it. And you never impose any facts or beliefs on anybody. You never do that. Even when they're at that point, you'd be like, okay, well, let me send you a YouTube video about this thing. Unless they ask, then you do that. You have to let people come to their own conclusions and go through that process. And that's the only way that it can be done. It's the only way that it can be done. And what other way is there? And if you look at it, most of us are just modeling and doing what's been modeled for us. Right? Because the only way we know how to make people believe stuff is what's been done to us over the generations. It was just like brainwashing. Here, watch this, pay attention to this, and you should think this way. And it's like, that's the same thing that Team Dark is doing, just brainwashing people, right? With narrative, right? The good news is all that narrative is built upon what Larkin calls the void. Bullshit. It's just a big gap in people's consciousness. It's like quicksand. And if you can get someone to the point where they realize the quicksand, the whole thing just falls down like a house of cards. And within a relatively short period of time, if you do it right, people will come to their own conclusions, start asking their own questions, and they start waking themselves up. And this is the biggest, greatest fear of the establishment, which is why I'm excited about this information and why I invested, my time and energy to actually learn this. And yeah, it's exciting for that reason. That's the only way to actually get through to people and to have real meaningful conversations. And I highly, highly recommend it because I can't teach you all this stuff in this video, but check it out if it's speaking to you. The other main thing that really hit home for me, and I immediately implanted this in my life right away, and it's probably the one thing that has had the most effect for me in my life over the past year and a half, is the realization that the more you care about people getting it, the less effective you are. The more you actually don't care, the more you're totally okay with them being where they are, the more people want to know the truth and the more they are receptive to you in that conversation. Because the whole system that he breaks down is really a series of asking questions. Like if somebody comes to you about, and they're convinced that authority and government and all that is just, super legit, you just ask them basic questions like, okay, well, do you believe that's okay that, I come to you and, if I want your stuff, it's okay for me to just beat you up and take your stuff? Well, no, that's not okay. They'll usually say and be like, yeah, I agree with you. So you're building this agreement. It's a stupid, simple question, but it's so effective. You build an agreement. You're like, cool, I agree with you. Well, do you agree that if you want my stuff and, force something upon me, for example, that I don't believe in, that it's okay for you to do that and beat me up and force me to do these things? They'll be like, Well, no, that's not okay. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, do you believe that hypothetically, for example, like you could just hire other people to do that and force me to do something if I don't want to do that? And you're like, no, that's not okay. Yeah, I agree with you. And as you build this whole thing until you actually get to the point where people realize that there's a schism inside of their own consciousness, because everybody at the root, and I may have gone over this already, has their own conscience, their own connection to themselves, this rooted self, their sense of right or wrong, their intuition, right? And then they have the other part of just this imaginary authority figure that tells them what to do and what to believe, and it's just completely juxtaposed against one another. And this is the really beautiful thing to realize about us and where we are right now in the collective consciousness as humanity, is the fact that most of us have actually been programmed with this juxtaposition in place. And so we're just one click away from going into the proper way of thinking if we're in an environment that's presented for us that allows that. And the biggest evidence of that is actually in movies and Hollywood. If you look through some of the most amazing movies out there of the hero's journey or the most famous people in history, but some movies to name, like Braveheart, the Hunger Games trilogy, the Matrix trilogy, right? What are those movies about? Or some of the most prominent people in the world, like Gandhi and Martin Luther King, for example. What are those heroes all about? It's about standing up against authority, against this authority figure inside of our minds that says just obey the law, even if the law is just bullshit. Just obey it, even if it makes you suffer, right? And obey it. And it's about people rising up against that, going against authority, going against government, and changing the world. And we cheer for those people. We rally up for them. We back them up, right? We identify them with them, because that's that part of you that's the conscience that just knows. It's the hero. It's the right and wrong and everything that's good about humanity. It's planted inside of us. And then there's this other part of like reality and programming in the society, which is trying to get more perverse and bigger right now, that just says, just be a good, law-abiding citizen and everything will be right, and that's the way to live. And if you do that, you'll be happy. Don't even ask. Don't worry about that. We'll drug you. You'll be happy that way. But if you do that, that's the thing to do. And these things are completely juxtaposed. These against themselves, because if you follow the law 100%, you can't follow your conscience. But if you follow your conscience all the way, you're always doing the right thing. Like your conscience, very, 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 if you're actually listening to the right thing inside of your heart, it cannot lay you astray, right? And then certain laws actually are created, but not because it's the law, just because human beings said, like, this is a good thing that has come out of our moral compass. Like, don't go out there and kill people, because that's what feels right. Killing people is bad, and then it becomes a law. Yeah, but we're not, like, if all of a sudden the law came out and said, oh, it's okay to kill people now. Well, we wouldn't just go out killing people because the law says that. We'd probably rebel against the law, right? Because this has nothing to do. So sometimes the law coincides with our own moral compass, but usually it's just a gobbledygook legislative bullshit. And, legislation, from what I've learned from Larkin, is usually only used to make something illegitimate legitimate, or seemingly legitimate. It's a bunch of gobbledygook. So this whole course is fantastic, and it's about breaking down the barriers inside of yourself to really understand what the hell is going on in this psychological warfare game that's going on in 99% of humanity right now, and how to communicate in such a way to get down to the root of all that, to actually help people make that switch. And once you help people make that switch, you just walk away and you let them come to their own conclusions, because that's the only way that it can be done. And that's the only way that must be done. So I think that's all I could say about this so far. It's pretty exciting to me, and I highly recommend it. And the way that, it's impacted me so far the most from everything I've said is, this just really taking the importance out of my personal need for people to understand things has actually been drastically reduced, and it's allowed me to be way more effective. Like you may have noticed, I'm not putting out any information out there or sending out videos about what's going on, or all the stuff that you see on Telegram and everywhere else. Because I've come to realize through this information and some other thoughts I've had earlier in the year that like the people who are already open to information, they're already past that bridge. They've already made that leap, and they're putting the bone back together. They're researching because they already are connected, right? And then there's that whole other spectrum of society that is not. And as much as that knee-jerk reaction says, go out there and just send information out there and hand out flyers, that may be effective a little bit, but in the long term, it's actually not. The way that we get through those people is actually through one-on-one communications and using a system such as this to lovingly, gently, with compassion, ask questions. Very simple questions. And if you look at the most effective psyops out there in the world, they're all based on just asking questions. And asking questions is the most powerful thing we can do as individuals if we want better answers and better results in our lives. But if we actually want to influence people, not just to believe what we believe, but to actually think how we think, which is what gets us out of this mess in the long run, I think. And the other thing I realized from watching Larkin is that there's really two modes of communication. One mode of communication, which is what most people do and we're used to, is the broadcasting mode of communication. And this is when you can present facts. This is when you can present evidence. This is where you can make a compelling argument, right? This is what books are. This is what videos are about. This is what a presentation to a lot of people is, much like this video right now. So I'm presenting you facts and evidence. And this is going to the part of your brain, if you're still watching, that's already open to this information. If you're on the other side, you just bounce out, right? So it's absolutely a waste of your time if you want to go make a difference and help people wake up to actually, constantly, if that's your aim, constantly putting out videos. Well, you can put out videos and put out information, but it's only going to bounce around the circle of people who are already open to that information. And if that's your calling, that's great. Do that, but for me, I've realized that's a bit of a waste of time because I want to find ways to be more effective to reach the people that have not been reached. And what I'm starting to realize is that the best thing I can do right now is just to walk away, live my life to the happiest way that I can, share information when it's needed, when it's asked for it, but to learn how to become a better communicator and how to really lead by example of, living the happiest, most awake, most impactful life I can right now during this time. So when it comes to these communications, I am a safe space for people to actually communicate with, and I can lead by example in that way. And this really came alive for me like 6 months ago. I was just starting to watch this information and get into it. And I was just walking down the road in Mexico somewhere, and a foreigner lady from the States just like tapped my shoulder. She's like, "Excuse me, my husband and I are looking for a restaurant. We're looking to eat somewhere. Like, do you know anyone?" And I'm like, "Yeah, just go here and there." And she's like, "Yeah, but what about the lockdowns and everything?" And I'm like, "It's just a big scam. Don't worry about it." And I just like walked away and said bye. And I was walking for like a whole block, and all of a sudden she ran up to me and she like tapped me on the shoulder there. She's like, "Excuse me." I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, I want to know what you're talking about. I haven't heard anything about this being like, tell me." I'm like, "Oh, cool. Well, blah, 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 blah." And I was like, I didn't think about it. But then watching Larkin later, I realized why that happened, because I was actually using the reverse method of what most of us do, the direct approach, versus understanding that the more detached you are from wanting people to know the truth right now, the more you just like walk your path, the happier you are doing your normal life, the more you are a safe space, and the more people actually want to know why you believe what you believe, and you can actually start to engage in conversation like this. And this is exactly what it talks about in the course. So I couldn't recommend this enough. If there's anything you get from this video watching it, just know that there is a way to talk to people to actually wake them up, that it's not hopeless, and that humanity as a whole, we're ready to wake up, because those two parts are in us, the cognitive dissonance here, the authority bullshit, externalization of things, and then there's the truth, which is inside of everybody. And the only thing you can do, the only power you have, is to bring someone's attention to that cognitive dissonance. That's the only thing you can do. And if you're communicating in any other way, it's probably a waste of your breath, unless you just want to entertain yourself. And so you have to become very, very clear within yourself as to, and your own triggers, to clear yourself, become peaceful in your communications, become centered, detached, And be very clear when you're talking to people, like, what is your aim? Do you want to entertain yourself? Are you just getting riled up? Or do you actually want to help them get to the cognitive dissonance? And there's a way to do it. And they have a whole system that shows it in this course. Check it out if you're interested. It's called Candles in the Dark. Worth every penny of like $75. I just checked this out and I'm not connected to it in any way. So check it out. Much love to you. Thanks for watching, and see you and me. And I guess you'll see me. I won't see you in another video. Ciao.